China is not coping well. Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. This video is about China's situation because of the tariffs. Basically, the US is trying to create fair trade, more free trade, basically, and China is not coping very well. They are in trouble. So I'm going to cover that in this video. So first of all, a lot of companies are leaving China, just pulling up stakes and leaving the country because of the 145% tariffs. If you're in China and you manufacture there because there's cheap labor, they don't pay their people very well, very low wages, slave labor. If you're in that country producing products and you export them to the US, you're now being hit with 145% tariff. So a lot of companies are leaving China. This is just a partial list. Nike, Adidas, Puma, and we all know what those products sell for in the US. They're made for pennies on the dollar in a poor country that takes advantage of its citizens by not paying them well. And the products are sold here in the US for exorbitant markups. HCD Housewares, it's a pretty big housewares company, is leaving. Also, Apple Computer is moving manufacturing to the United States. They're getting out of China. NVIDIA, same. They're going to start building products in the US. And a lot of textile companies, garments and cloths and clothing are leaving China. So that's a partial list. So a lot of companies have said, these tariffs by the US are going to make it impossible to have a viable business. We're going to have to leave. And we cannot be subjected to these high US 145% tariffs. So we're going to leave. So it makes sense. It's a business decision. They have to leave the country. So that really hurts China because a lot of jobs are being lost there. This could have been avoided if China had acted responsibly and reasonably, if they had been reasonable and not erected trade barriers to U.S. products and not stopped U.S. goods from being sold in that country. This was avoidable. These huge tariffs, the 145% tariffs, were avoidable. Yesterday, I made a video that explained that the U.S. would prefer to never have to use tariffs. The U.S. prefers free trade, and that's been true for almost every government that we've had, all the different presidents going way back. If you watch the video from yesterday, I describe how recent presidents have had to use tariffs. The fact is the U.S. would prefer not to have to do that. But in some cases, it's been hurting the U.S. so much that it's a tool that is being used. So these companies are fleeing China. That's going to hurt China. Okay? So the reality is, though, in a lot of ways, other ways besides the trade barriers, if you set up shop inside China, if you're a foreign company, here are some examples. Saline Automotive, large U.S. automotive company, set up a subsidiary in China. It was stolen, over $1 billion in theft by the Chinese Communist Party in August of 2020. They call it nationalizing, but they basically stole Saline Automotive's company in China. So when you see that, you say, I'm not going to set up shop there because the Communist Party will steal my company. So that's a real dumb move by a foreign country to entice a company to come in and then to steal the company. This sends a signal to every other possible company who might ever think about doing business in China, and they're going to say, we're not going to do that. Look what they did to Saline Automotive, and pretty recent too, August of 2020. Another problem with China is forced surrender of technology. If you want access to the market in China, you are forced to surrender your proprietary technology to the Communist Party to set up shop in China. They try to deny that, but it's actually still true. They have made efforts to sort of bury it in regulations. In the fine print, you must surrender technology if you want to operate in China. Foreign automakers like General Motors, Tesla, Volkswagen have been forced to surrender trade secrets. So that's another sign. When a country tells you we're not going to let you operate here unless you give us your most prized possessions, your intellectual property, that just tells any other company, we're not going to do that. It's cost us so much to create our own proprietary trade secrets and proprietary knowledge. We're not going to surrender it just to have access to your market. So China forces the surrender of technology in the following industries. A lot of different industries, but these are the biggies. Aerospace companies, if they want to set up shop in China, give us all your intellectual property. Renewable energy, same. Automotive, I've already talked about Saline and GM, Tesla, Volkswagen, and others. If you want to do business in China, give us your trade secrets. Semiconductors, those are computer chips, same. Give us your intellectual property or you can't operate here. It's like, okay, I'm not going to operate there, right? So, they're hurting themselves. It's so irrational to tell someone who's trying, because if you think about it, these companies, if they set up shop in China, is providing jobs for citizens in China. In fact, if you think about it, U.S. tariffs are designed to entice companies to provide jobs for our own citizens. The U.S. is not telling those companies, when you come here, we're going to steal your intellectual property. The benefit is if you can employ U.S. citizens, we will give you access to our market. China says, not only must you provide jobs for our citizens, we're going to steal all your intellectual property too. Real dumb. It's just irrational. So this forced technology, I keep misspelling technology. I'm sorry about that. It's missing the N. Forced technology surrender means these companies who were foolish enough to go to China in the first place. The fact is, if I was on the board of some of these companies, I would say, we're not going into China. We're not surrendering our intellectual property. It's not happening. It's too valuable. We're providing jobs for their citizens. That should be enough. If it's not enough, we're not doing business in China. So this forced technology surrendering means companies lose their competitive edge because China companies get all their trade secrets. They steal the intellectual property. And because of that, many companies will never agree to surrender the intellectual property. They'll never consider setting up shop and providing jobs for citizens in China. Real stupid. The market in China is not worth it anyways. It's too small of a market because they don't pay their people. They have a lot of slave labor. They pay low wages. Their market is small and weak. It doesn't make sense to set up shop in that country anyways. The market is too small. There's too much poverty, slave labor, low pay. So right now, as we speak, China is losing $100 billion because of these tariffs. $100 billion every 5.5 months because of U.S. tariffs. Over the next 2 years, they stand to lose $400 billion because of these tariffs. So the solution is to stop erecting trade barriers. If we want to sell into your market, or if we want to set up shop in your market, that's a benefit to you, China. So make it easy on us. If you're going to steal everything, it's not going to work, right? So China is now reducing tariffs on U.S. imports. And this is kind of another issue that's come up recently. They're trying to deny that they're cooperating with the U.S. on this tariff issue. It's real cowardly. It's just extreme cowardice. It's really strange because if you think about it, when you're negotiating something, most countries in the West, maybe it's because of free press, maybe it's because China, the Communist Party, does not allow freedom of speech. But in the U.S. and in other Western countries, when there are negotiations going on a large scale, they're covered, right? They're announced. The U.S. is never shy to. Right now, we're negotiating with Iran, for example, to try to get them to stop trying to build nuclear weapons, and that's all over. That's in all the papers. It's on TV. So China has been denying that they're cooperating with the U.S., but they are. They're actually cooperating with the U.S. I'll give you a list of tariffs that they are eliminating or reducing. They had imposed tariffs of 125% on U.S. semiconductors, computer chips. They're reducing or eliminating those. Some petroleum products from the U.S., no more tariffs. Some medical gear from the U.S. being imported from the United States, reduced tariffs or no more tariffs. U.S. airplane leases and jet engines, U.S. vaccines, imported U.S. aircraft parts. In fact, there's 130 categories of products that China had imposed these high tariffs on. They're now eliminating or reducing. Again, it's sort of a strange, cowardly act to be unwilling to admit that. Yes, we are cooperating with our important trading partners. Would be, a rational thing to do, to announce that, yes, we want to cooperate. We recognize it's mutually beneficial for trade across country lines, across borders. So we're going to be honest about it and we're going to be open about it. Instead, they're lying and saying they're not cooperating. They are cooperating in all those areas I just mentioned. So part of the reason they're cooperating now is because China's economy is suffering. They're starting to take hits, and their consumer market is small and weak, anyways, right? And so they're actually in bad shape. Now, it's true that their citizens have less ability to petition the government for their grievances, right? Like we do here in the U.S. and in other Western countries. But their citizens are hurting. So China's economy is now destabilized. There are a lot of reports you can read about that. If you go online, you can read a lot of stories about that. They're suffering a destabilized economy in China. They have a huge crisis in real estate, in property. And their consumer demand and consumer sentiment has hit the floor. They're in bad shape there. And the most harmful thing for China right now is they have lost a lot of access to sell stuff in the U.S. market, because the U.S. is saying, no more. If you're not going to play fair, you don't get access to our market. So China's in bad shape. They should come out and say, okay, we have been blowing it. We have made mistakes historically in trade with other countries. We're going to start paying our citizens better and treat them like human beings. We're going to eliminate all slave labor, and we are going to cooperate with our trading partners. We're going to be more fair and more reasonable. They are reducing trade barriers because they have to, because their economy is starting to take hits. And over the next 5.5 months, they're going to lose $100 billion. That's a huge hit. So they have to cooperate. They probably don't like it, but at some point, because personally, I've worked with a lot of people from Taiwan and from China and from that part of the world. They tend to be really smart people, and most of them are very nice people. And it's kind of a shame that things have come to this, that it's gotten to the point where we've had to take these measures. But the problem is, I covered this in the video yesterday, it's been hurting the U.S. from the loss of jobs. I described the millions and millions of jobs lost to China because of their unfair trade practices over the years in yesterday's video. And the U.S. had to put a stop to it. President Biden, during his presidential term, President Trump had put a tariff of 25% on electric vehicles from China. President Biden quadrupled it to 100% when he was president. Again, because leadership of a country has a responsibility, at least in the West. I don't know about communist countries. At least in the West, leadership has a job to protect its citizens militarily and economically. And that's what's happening here. That's why President Biden said, we're not going to let you dump electric vehicles into the U.S. market. We're going to quadruple the tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles from Trump's 25% to the new 100%. So it's a shame that it's come to this, that we've had to take sort of dramatic action. But the fact is this: the U.S. economy and citizens in the U.S. have been suffering poverty because of the unfair trading practices. So bringing jobs back into this country to employ more U.S. citizens is a good idea, because we shouldn't have all this poverty, all this homelessness. So many of those people would love to have a job, would love to have a productive way of life. A lot of them are quite unhappy about being homeless. And if we can bring some of these jobs back to this country, the millions that have been lost to China, it will certainly help the homelessness problem here in this country. So anyway, so that's kind of where things are with China. They're not coping very well. They don't want to admit. It's like if you have children, that when your child makes a mistake, right, they don't want to admit it, right? At some point, as they grow up and they become an adult, hopefully anyways, they're more willing to admit when they've made mistakes. Because the faster you admit you've made a mistake, the faster you raise your hand and say, I blew it here. I'm going to own up to that. It was a decision I made to behave incorrectly. And going forward, I'm going to try to correct that. So if you have young children, a lot of the times they try to hide the fact that they misbehaved. As they grow up, they start realizing it's much better to correct the problem really fast and to cooperate with everyone else, to be cooperative and to be reasonable. So hopefully China will get to that point where these measures will not be necessary. But in the meantime, the United States citizens need their jobs back. We need our jobs back. We have a huge homelessness problem, and a lot of those people would love to work, would just love to have a job. So if you have any questions about this, please post the questions in the comments. And I really want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day.